26 November 1983, 6 in the morning, 6 armed robbers stormed into the Brinks-Mat warehouse near Heathrow Airport to carry out what they thought was going to be a small robbery. They thought they were about to walk away with £3 million in cash. But lucky them, instead of £3 million, they found diamonds, 3 tons of gold bullion and £100,000 in cash. It was worth £26 million, almost £90 million today. They felt like they had just received a Christmas gift from Santa. The robbers looted every last bar of gold, every diamond, every note, and by the time they left, the world market price of gold rose by about £1.1 million. And it all happened because they had an insider, someone who carried out the most important part of the heist and made it possible for the crime of the century to happen. So, how did they pull it off? How did one of the biggest gold heists change Britain? Well, the first light of dawn was creeping across London when these men approached the fortress-like walls of Unit 7 at Heathrow International Trading Estate. The bandit-proof door that Brinks-Mat proudly advertised might as well have been made of paper because the armed men had help from the inside. It was Anthony Black, a security guard with access to everything that mattered. All he had to do was simply open the door from the inside. But why did he help them? Well, Black's brother-in-law was Brian the Colonel Robinson, who wasn't the type to waste such an opportunity, so he decided to rob the place with his help. Robinson and his partner, Michael Mickey McAvoy, knew something most robbers miss. The best locks in the world are useless when your own man has the keys. So, the gang entered the place as easily as they could. They were carrying automatic pistols, so when they shouted their orders, everybody listened. Within minutes, the staff were on the ground, with their hands cuffed behind their backs and their ankles taped up. The armed gang put hoods over their heads to cut off their sight and crank up their fear. But the real terror was about to start, and what happened next showed just how far these men were willing to go. The robbers had brought petrol. They poured it over the terrified guards and made their demand to open the vault, or they would set them on fire. The smell of gasoline was enough to convince them to do what they were being told. Even police investigators later said they had rarely seen criminals use fear this effectively during a robbery. The vault was supposed to stop exactly this kind of attack. Behind thick concrete walls sat the gold and cash storage area, protected by multiple locks and alarms that needed 2 people to open. Robin Risley, who had served in the army, knew the combinations. Michael Mike Skeels had the physical keys. Under normal circumstances, this double-layer security made breaking in nearly impossible, but nothing about this morning was normal when your own security guard had already given away every secret. Black had been planning this for months. He had been meeting with Robinson and McAvoy, taking photos of doors and security setups like he was doing a legitimate inspection. When valuable shipments arrived at the facility, he made a simple phone call from a Brinks-Mat payphone using their code. "Let's go fishing tonight." Those 5 words triggered the next morning's attack. It was timed perfectly to catch everyone off guard. The staff were forced through one security door after another. The robbers stayed calm and controlled, even when recently changed lock combinations briefly slowed them down. Where amateur criminals might have panicked, these men simply turned up the pressure and kept moving forward. Then they found something that changed everything. The crew expected about £3.2 million in cash. It was a big score, but nothing crazy. Instead, they discovered 6,800 gold bars stacked on wooden pallets. 3 tons of pure bullion worth £26 million in 1983 money. They didn't waste time debating what to do. Every gold bar they could carry went into their trucks. The technical problems they solved were impressive. The 2-person security system should have been unbreakable, but controlling both the key holder and the combination keeper at the same time cracked it wide open. The alarm system was designed to detect break-ins, but when legitimate staff opened the doors even under extreme duress, it stayed silent. Most importantly, they knew those serial numbers on every bar would make selling the gold incredibly dangerous, but they took it anyway. Before leaving, one of the robbers turned back to the tied-up guards and said their final insult, "Merry Christmas, lads." That cruel joke would be remembered long after the gold disappeared. As soon as the heist happened, the news hit London's financial markets immediately. When word spread that 3 tons of gold had vanished from supposedly secure storage, gold prices actually jumped higher. Traders added roughly £1.1 million in market value before things settled down. Lloyd's of London was the insurance company here that was hit the hardest, and was now facing massive insurance payouts. Johnson Matthey, whose gold had just walked out the door, was about to have its worst year ever. The robbers had pulled off Britain's biggest gold heist, but they had also created their biggest problem. The curse of Brinks-Mat. Mat started right when they stepped foot outside the facility. Stealing millions is one thing, but turning traceable gold bars into spendable cash without getting caught is an entirely different beast. What happened next would create a criminal empire, cost lives, and prove that sometimes the cover-up is deadlier than the crime itself. See, each gold bar carried serial numbers and refiner marks that tied directly back to Johnson Matthey bankers. Try to sell even one bar through normal channels, and alarms would scream across London's financial district within hours. The robbers needed more than luck here. They needed criminal masterminds who specialized in making hot gold look legitimate. What they found instead was a network of money launderers. Michael McAvoy made the first important decision by splitting the gold among trusted associates Brian Perry and George Francis. This was his smart decision to distribute risk while maintaining control, but even pro-criminals like Perry and Francis knew they were in over their heads. They needed a cleaner, someone with the technical knowledge and criminal connections to make 3 tons of stolen bullion disappear into the legitimate gold market. Kenneth Noye emerged as the man for the job, though calling him just a money launderer sells his criminal sophistication short. Noye had built his reputation as a smooth operator with connections that stretched from London's underworld to law enforcement circles and Masonic lodges. His small haulage business provided perfect cover for moving heavy, valuable cargo without attracting attention. More importantly, Noye understood something most criminals miss. The best criminal operations look completely legal from the outside. Working alongside Brian Reeder, an experienced fence who had helped underworld gangs launder stolen goods for years, Noye began the delicate process of erasing the gold's criminal fingerprints. They melted down the original bars, mixed in copper coins to change the metal composition, and recast everything into new ingots that bore no trace of their Johnson Matthey origins. The serial numbers that should have doomed them simply melted away in the furnace heat. But Noye wasn't working alone. John Goldfinger Palmer, operating from Somerset through companies like Skadlin Limited, became the operation's other critical player. Palmer's jewelry business provided the perfect legitimate front for handling large quantities of gold. His plan was to melt the stolen bullion and pass it off as purchased or recycled metal from his jewelry operations. On paper, it looked like smart business, but they were carrying an illegitimate, criminally genius plan. The receipt scam Noye developed shows just how thoroughly these criminals understood the system they were beating. He traveled to Jersey and bought legitimate gold with clean money. He carefully collected official receipts and documentation. He stored these legal bars in deposit boxes, then carried the paperwork back to England. When questions arose about his laundered Brinks-Mat gold, he would produce these genuine Jersey receipts as proof of legitimate purchase. But criminal brilliance has its limits, and Noye's Jersey operation eventually attracted the wrong kind of attention. Bank officials in Jersey started noticing patterns that didn't add up. When the same customer repeatedly showed up with massive gold purchases, collected receipts, and left without the actual metal, someone with common sense asked questions. That bank official's suspicious report to police became investigators' first solid lead. This lead connected specific individuals to the stolen Brinks-Mat bullion. The Metropolitan Police launched Operation Brinks-Mat, with surveillance focused on Noye's Kent property, Hollywood Cottage. Detectives didn't know exactly what they were watching for, but they knew Noye was connected to the missing gold. What they discovered was a criminal operation far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. The surveillance revealed visitors, vehicles, and activities that suggested large-scale money laundering was happening right under their noses. Meanwhile, a crucial lead nearly slipped through investigators' fingers. A couple living near Bath reported seeing an unusual glow from a garden shed shortly after the robbery. There was an industrial furnace heat that had no business being there. When police investigated, they found the furnace, but dismissed it because it was outside their jurisdiction. That missed opportunity would haunt the investigation for months, because that glowing shed housed Palmer's gold smelting operation, the very heart of the laundering network. Back in London, investigators began connecting dots. Bank records showed £13 million moving through Barclays branches in Bristol, traced to Palmer's Skadlin Limited. That volume of unexplained gold transactions reportedly triggered alerts at the Bank of England, though officials later denied being involved. By late 1984, the police were getting closer, but the criminal sophistication was also increasing. Noye and his network had learned from early mistakes and developed increasingly complex money laundering techniques. They moved gold in smaller batches to avoid detection, mixed criminal proceeds with legitimate business income, and began shifting funds offshore through jurisdictions with weak financial controls. They did it using shell companies in Liechtenstein, Switzerland, Jersey, and the Isle of Man. These companies were created with help from services in Jersey, and later Mossack Fonseca in Panama, including dummy corporations like Faberion. This was decades before modern anti-money laundering laws existed. Banks had minimal reporting requirements, offshore jurisdictions operated with near-complete secrecy, and moving criminal proceeds internationally was surprisingly straightforward for anyone who understood the system. The crew was quietly turning stolen gold into bulk cash, luxury properties, and untouchable offshore accounts. The surveillance operation took a deadly turn in early 1985. This happened when detectives decided to go undercover at Noye's property. Detective Constable John Fordham and Officer Neil Murphy approached Hollywood Cottage in camouflage gear. They were hoping to catch criminals in the act of moving suspicious packages. In the darkness of Noye's garden, something went catastrophically wrong. Noye discovered Fordham on his property and stabbed the officer 10 or 11 times. Fordham died from his wounds. This turned this financial investigation into a murder case that made national headlines. Fordham's death changed everything about the investigation's tone and scope. Police raided Noye's property with new urgency and discovered 11 gold bars from the original Brinks-Mat haul hidden in a paint tin. Forensic testing confirmed these bars matched the stolen bullion. This provided the first physical evidence directly connecting the theft to specific criminals. The game had shifted from following money trails to solving a police officer's murder. After that, the police realized their earlier mistake and finally examined Palmer's furnace operation. They found industrial smelting equipment and accounting records that made no sense for legitimate gold dealing. But Palmer had already fled to Tenerife. But it was his failed attempt to hide in Brazil. Palmer was finally arrested not long after that. But the strange part is that this heist story would soon become the curse of Brinks-Mat, because everyone who touched that stolen gold ended up either behind bars or 6 feet under. The first convictions happened after the first betrayal. Anthony Black cracked under police pressure and confessed to everything. His testimony sent Brian Robinson and Mickey McAvoy down for 25 years each. Black himself received 6 years, which was the standard price for betraying your employers and your accomplices. Next on the list of pending arrests were Brian Perry, George Francis, John Goldfinger Palmer, and Kenneth Noye. They had built a criminal conveyor belt that ran from Somerset smelters to offshore shell companies scattered across Liechtenstein, Panama, and Switzerland. Noye's receipt scam still impresses financial crime experts today, but the cover-up quickly became more dangerous than the original crime. In May 1985, George Francis barely survived an assassination attempt outside his own home. That near miss sent a clear message through the criminal network that too many people knew too many secrets, and paranoia was replacing trust. Everyone suspected someone else might talk to save their own skin. The murders started in earnest with the accountant killings. In 1989, financial advisor Terry Gooderham and his girlfriend were gunned down in Wandsworth. Police believe Gooderham had been skimming profits from Brinks' R-Fans, and 2 bullets settled that accounting dispute permanently. But it wouldn't be the last time money disagreements took someone's life. What most people don't realize is how the stolen millions accidentally fueled Britain's exploding drug trade. By the early 1990s, clean Brinks-Mat cash was bankrolling the country's booming ecstasy scene. Those bullion bars that started in a Heathrow warehouse ended up financing pills in London nightclubs. It was a criminal evolution nobody saw coming. But the body count kept climbing. Charlie Wilson, who was the legendary Great Train Robbery treasurer, and suspected Brinks-Mat, Matt Moneyman, was shot dead in Marbella in 1990. Donald Urquhart, another launderer, was executed in a London street hit in 1993. Brian Perry, who had helped melt those original bars, was gunned down outside a car dealership in 2001. George Francis, who had survived that first assassination attempt, finally ran out of luck in 2003 when killers caught him in his Range Rover outside his courier business. The most shocking death came in 2015 when John Goldfinger Palmer was shot 6 times in his Essex garden. Police initially thought he had died from heart complications, as he had his recent surgery scars masking the bullet wounds. Only later did investigators realize Palmer had become another victim of the curse that refused to die. That's 6 major players eliminated. and the list doesn't include smaller fish who simply vanished without headlines. Conservative estimates put Brinks-Mat related deaths at 15 or more people over 3 decades. Kenneth Noye managed to survive the laundering phase, only to write his own violent chapter years later. He escaped murder charges for stabbing Detective Fordham by claiming self-defense. But yes, he served time for handling stolen goods. Still, he couldn't stay out of trouble. In 1996, a road rage incident on the M25 ended with Noye stabbing 2 one-year-old Stephen Cameron to death. He fled to Spanish luxury villas until extradition caught up with him in 1998. This time, the jury rejected his excuses. He got life for murder in 2000 and remains one of Britain's most notorious criminals. The ultimate irony that makes this story so perfectly cruel is that by the mid-1990s, the gold was gone. It was successfully laundered into the financial system, melted into jewellery, or buried in property portfolios across London and Spain. McAvoy's dream of prison to riches never came true. Robinson, who also got out in the 2000s, found nothing waiting for him. The gold had vanished while they rotted in cells. The curse earned its name because Brinks' every format changed how crime worked in Britain. Before 1983, financial crime laws barely existed. Money laundering was poorly understood, and international cooperation was practically non-existent. This case forced regulators to tighten controls. They made it a standard to report suspicious transactions and created the international financial crime fighting frameworks that we know today. But it also changed the criminal underworld itself. The heist connected old-school armed robbers with sophisticated financial criminals, drug traffickers, and offshore banking specialists. It proved that if they wanted to commit modern crime, they had to learn more about paperwork, shell companies, and property deeds. Now, this was not the only clever operation happening in Britain at that time. If you want to hear about more criminal stories, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We will come back soon with more shocking stories. Goodbye for now.